It was Wayne Dwyer that said, "If you believe it will work, you'll see opportunities. If you believe it won't, you will see obstacles." My guest today is Matt O'Neill, the host of the Good Mood Revolution podcast. Matt is someone who is always striving to be in a good mood. He does this through adventure with his family and by helping others to overcome their challenges and be in a good mood. You may want to have a pen and paper ready for this one, because I know you'll find some great takeaways and lessons. Get ready to be inspired by adventure and telling ourselves to be in a good mood. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. Journey with Jake. This is episode number 119 today. We have a good one today. I was honored to have Matt O'Neill on the show with me. Matt is the host of the Good Mood Revolution podcast, and he really got me in a good mood after struggling a bit with my mood, so the timing was perfect for this. Before we get into my conversation with Matt, remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. That way you don't miss an episode of Journey with Jake. Also, I am now putting the episodes on YouTube, so you can search Journey with Jake podcast on YouTube if you prefer to watch the episodes. I'm still trying to find the best format for YouTube, so I appreciate your patience as I work through that part of it. What a great conversation I had with Matt O'Neill. We talked about adventure, family, spirituality, and being in a good mood overall. And Matt worked with me on a few things to help me, so in my opinion, this episode had it all. If you like this episode, you will also love episode 50 with endurance and success coach Mario Minert. Okay, let's get to the episode with Matt O'Neill. I'm excited today because I have Matt O'Neill on the show with me. Matt is someone who I'm really interested to talk to because he's all about being in a good mood and how to achieve happiness, and it's kind of all on the inside and what we can do for that. He's also an adventurous guy, so we're going to talk a little bit about that and some of the adventures he does with his family. Matt, welcome to the show. Welcome to Journey with Jake.
What up, Jake? Man, so excited to be here, bro.
Me too, man.
Hey, adventure is one of the keys to happiness. Like, I read this really cool book by Chip and Dan Heath. It was called The Power of Moments. And they said that you actually slow down time the more adventure you take. And they said, and I'll elaborate what they mean by that. They said, if a normal week, you go to work, you put your kids to bed, you make dinner, you go to bed, the next day you go to work, so on and so forth. This week rolls into next week, rolls into next month, rolls into next month, and 6 months goes by, and then a year goes by. You can't really remember any day. That time went super, super, super fast because it was all super boring and routine. And like, we think we want this routine. But then if you're like, oh man, what's something cool you did this year? You always remember your vacations, right? So Chip and Dan Heath said, the more like power adventure you put into your life, the more you remember for the year. It actually makes the year go slower. You pack more life into your life. And so you're totally onto something. Your podcast is completely rad. And I love what you're doing.
I love that because I kind of feel like I'm living a little bit of that right now. Like the last couple of weeks have just been kind of monotonous and just kind of doing my thing
until this conversation, right?
Until
we just broke out of the mold.
100%. Yeah. So that's cool. You don't think about it, and you're right. You think it'd almost be the opposite. You think, okay, when you do something adventurous, it's going to make time go by quicker and faster. And while that experience may happen fast, you think back on it more and you reflect on it more.
Mm-hmm.
I love looking at it like
you're in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So life just flies by when it's so super mundane. So I set goals in 7 different categories each year. And one of the 7 categories is epic adventure.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, very cool. We're going to get to know that a little bit more. Before we dive into some of that, who's Matt O'Neill? Where are you from? Who are you? Kind of what's your background?
Yeah, man. Grew up in Michigan, and then I wanted an adventure when I got out of college, so I went to Colorado and was skiing and snowboarding and like hanging out in Colorado. But then I was like, all right, now I want to go to the beach, right? So I want to experience. You grow up in Michigan, there's kind of gray skies. There's not a whole lot of cool stuff to do. It's all right. Colorado was super cool. So I was mountain biking in the summer. We were camping and hiking, and it was just killer. It was awesome. But then I'm like, all right, I want to go experience the beach. So I was going to fly to San Diego next. And I put money down to go to San Diego and get into real estate and like live in like Pacific Beach Park. That's where my condo was going to be with my buddy Adam. And then, but my cousin was in Charleston, South Carolina. And so I'm like, all right, hey, I'm going to go check out the other coast and check out that beach. And I got to Charleston and I was just like, this is it. I could feel it. As soon as my feet touched the ground, I said, this is where I'm supposed to be. I just knew my whole future was there. And then I met my wife, Katie, a couple of years later. We have 4 kids. And I have a couple different companies in the real estate space, property management company and real estate sales company, about 80 employees or so. And so that's kind of a big life. But what I love to do, my passion, is to teach people that happiness is truly a choice, regardless of how many struggles we think we're going through. Anything really where we're suffering is just a negative narrative that we're telling ourselves. So that's what I teach on my Good Mood Revolution podcast.
I love it. The Good Mood Revolution podcast. Everybody remember that. Check it out. Awesome. I started listening to a few clips. I'm going to dive into it more because I need some of that good mood vibes
We all
coming
do,
my
man.
way.
Hey, I
100%.
wouldn't have started this podcast if I was always in good moods. It's because I get in such bad moods. I was like, all right, I got to do something about this and feel good more of the time. So I'll teach other people how to do it, and that'll like make me accountable to feeling good.
That's fantastic. All right, so you're in Colorado. You're having a great time. You loved Colorado. And Colorado's a beautiful state.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Plenty of recreation, plenty of adventure to find there. And then you had the choice kind of between either it's going to be San Diego, and it looked like it was going to be San Diego. And I think of beach places. I mean, San Diego comes to mind. San Diego's a beautiful city, right there with great beaches. But somehow you ended up on the other coast in Charleston, South Carolina. You said it felt right when you got there. What was it about Charleston that made that feel like that for you?
I'm a ridiculously I'm so spiritual. And I can't always explain it. I just know that we're all guided, and it's if we're listening to that guidance or if we're not. And when my feet touched the ground in Charleston, it is not a logical explanation. There was no like conscious thought. It was just as soon as I was walking on the ground in Charleston, I just had a knowing this was my destiny and my future. And I can't explain it any better than that. That I just knew.
That's awesome. And at that point, had you met your wife yet at that point?
No, so this was 2006, and then we met 3 years later in 2009.
Very good. And now you have 4 kids.
Yeah.
What boys, girls, ages? What do you got?
We got 3 girls, and then the youngest is a boy, ages 10 to 2.
10 to 2. You got your hands full. You're the exact opposite of me. I have 4 kids as well, but I had 3 boys and then a girl. So we kind of
good way to do it. You got her.
We got her. We finally got her. Yeah.
Girls are awesome, man.
Yeah.
Like they're so awesome. My 3 girls are in surf camp this week. And we do have beaches here in Charleston, and surfing is a deal here. So I because I'm so into adventure, of course I was a big time skier and snowboarder, and that was my adventure in Colorado. When I got here, I'm like, man, I mountain biked, and mountain biking is a big adventure sport. When I got here, everything's flat. There's no mountains. They call it the low country because we're all on sea level. And I'm like, I got to figure out this ocean. So I'm like, I'm going to get into surfing. And then when I had kids, I got my kids into surfing, and this is adventure we get to do together because I love to surf. They love to surf. And, but the way that they love to surf is because I put them in these camps. At the camp, all their friends are doing it. The high school people are the teachers. So of course my kids are like looking up to these high school kids like they're the coolest people ever. And now they're all like catching waves, and it's awesome.
That's great. And the oldest one's 10, so they're young still, and they're out there doing it.
Yeah. So 10, 8, and 6. My 6-year-old, this is her first time ever standing up on a surfboard. And you know, and I would take him out because but my 6-year-old was always too scared to like try to stand up, and rightfully so. It's scary. Waves are big, and you get tumbled by one, and you get salt water up your nose. You don't want to do it again. But
Right.
she came home and she's like, "Dad, I surfed 6 waves today." I'm like, "Dude, that is killer. How did you do it? Like, what happened? How come you were so brave to do that?" And she said, "Well, I saw the other kids doing it." And I was like, "Whatever, I'm in."
Good motivation. When those other kids are doing it, you got to get out there
Yeah,
and
you're
do
not
it.
gonna be the loser that's sitting on the side. She's like, "I'm
Right.
gonna go do this."
Ah, that's awesome, man. I love it. One of the cool things I like that you said that you did was you try to take your kids kind of on these one-on-one trips to kind of, for adventure, part of it's for adventure. And I think you mentioned you did the Appalachian Trail with one of your daughters, and you got another plan coming up. Can you talk a little bit about these trips that you've done and then kind of maybe share a few experiences?
Yeah, so I joined this men's group called Go Abundance, and it's like abundance it starts with a go, and the tagline is a tribe of healthy, wealthy, generous men who choose to lead epic lives, and like they say, we grab life big, right? That's these guys, and hanging out with these guys, they've got families, they're my age guys, and they're we just kind of get together, and we always get together and do something super cool. So every winter I go to the winter adventure with these guys, and it's at a different ski resort. This year we skied Vermont, Stowe Mountain. I'd never skied Vermont
Cool.
before. It was really cool. But I was hanging out with some guys like 2019. So my kids were 5 years younger. So my oldest at that time was 5 years old. And this guy had sold his company and moved to Hawaii with his kids. And he just was like looking over the ocean. He could see whales breaching every day. So he lived an epic life himself. And a guy named Brandon Turner, who started one of the biggest podcasts ever, sold his podcast for $50 million.
Wow.
His podcast was called Bigger Pockets. And it's a real estate podcast. But I'm hanging out with Brandon, and he's like, the coolest thing I've done is I do a one-on-one trip with each of my kids every year. And I'm like, well, tell me about it. He's like, they tell me what they want to do, anything they want to do. I'm like, I'm in. And he said, it has changed my relationship with all of my kids, because usually we're around all the other kids, but on the one-on-one trip, we're in the plane together, we're in the hotel together, we're doing exactly what they want to do. And he said, you just kind of your relationship gets to a level it can't get to otherwise. And around the same time, I read this book called 18 Summers by a guy named Jim Shields. And Jim said, you only have 18 summers, and then your kids are gone. And sure, they'll come back with their spouse, and you'll have Christmas together, but they're out of the house. Like, you think you have forever. You think, especially when they're in the diaper age and
Right.
you're running around all the sports. That's where we're at right now, is like every single night's a different sport. He's like, you think it's going to last forever, and it's so quick. It's only 18 summers, and then they're out. And he said, so this is what I do with my kids. He said, every month I do a one-on-one day. So I took those two ideas and I implemented them into my life. And so every month I do one-on-one day with one child, and I've got 4. So that means each child is getting a one-on-one day every 4 months, right? And each year I do one-on-one trip with one of them. So every 4 years they're getting a one-on-one trip with me. So I'm not like Brandon. I'm not doing 4 one-on-one trips a year. I'm just doing 1 a year. This is doable. This was a way I could make this thing work. And so that was 5 years ago. So my first one-on-one trip was with my daughter, and my buddy had just had a baby, and I'm like, hey, do you want to go fly out to the Quad Cities and see Mr. Mike and meet the new baby Bella? And she's like, yeah, that'd be awesome. So that was the very first one-on-one trip when she was 5. We flew out to Quad Cities, Iowa. We went to Apple Orchard and picked apples, and and just did some cool stuff. So she was 5. She didn't know what she wanted to do. This was just like the adventure. But we stayed at my buddy's house. We slept in the same bed together. We like, flew on the plane together, and we had a blast. And we always, we still telling stories about that trip, about her picking up these rocks, and it was cool. So then the next one-on-one trip I did was with my next oldest daughter, and she said, I want to go to Disney. I'm like, okay, cool. Usually people are like, man, Disney is not my favorite place. I can tell you, if you take one child, just a one-on-one trip to Disney, it is the most fun you could possibly have. See other kids that don't want to do this ride, that don't want to wait in that line, and people are hot, people are tired. I'm with Cameron, and I'm like, what do you want to do, Cam? And she's like, I want to eat ice cream for breakfast. I'm like, heck yeah, let's go get some ice cream. So we go get ice cream. We're sitting down on the bench eating ice cream for breakfast. And I'm like, now what do you want to do? She's like, I want to do that ride. So we go do that ride. And then halfway through the day, she's like, Dad, I want to go to the pool. And I'm like, let's head out of here, go to the pool. So just the whole time I was just doing exactly what she wanted to do. And it was that's all I wanted to do, was just be
what she wanted to do
with what she, yeah.
And there's no fighting with the siblings. It's them, one-on-one with them.
And it's so easy because it's just whatever is going to make them happy is going to make me happy on this trip. And so there's no drama in it, and your relationship does go to another level. So, my next daughter, my next daughter, she wanted to go to Disney as well. That was a few years later. So I did another trip with Kelly, totally different trip. She wanted to do different things, different parks. My other daughter, Harper, we went back around, and she said, all right, I want to shop. Like, I'm really into shopping. And this was when she was 8. So I'm like, well, where do you want to go shopping? She said, I want to go to shopping in Miami. And so we flew to Miami. And when we were down there, talk about adventure, we're right off the coast. So we took a snorkeling trip. We took a boat out and went snorkeling one day. And then as we're driving by, there's this huge twisty slide. It's like 10 stories tall. And I'm like, we've got to go on that twisty slide. So we pull in and we go to the top. We do this big twisty slide together. And and then last year, my 8-year-old was back up, and this is Cameron. And I'm like, Cam, what do you want to do? You want to go on a surfing trip? You want to go hiking? And she's like, let's go hiking. So we did a 23-mile backpack trip with an 8-year-old.
I was going to say, that's impressive. An 8-year-old on a 23-mile trip. Woo.
She's tough, but I'll tell you, so there was a pretty scary moment in there. I got her backpack on her, and she's 8, she's just a little kid. She's tough, but she's still just 8. So she brought her little stuffed dog with her named Lily. And we're hiking up this mountain, and it's up and up and up and up. And I'm like, Cam, you doing all right? And it was so intense, the uphill incline on the first day, that we stopped talking because we just had to focus on trying to get up this mountain. And then I hear her fall. So I'm leading the way. She slips, and I turn around. And Cam wears glasses. Her glasses are strewn way across the way, and she's got a huge cut on her head. She had fallen flat down and held her dog and didn't put her hands down, like to protect the stuffed animal. And he took a rock straight on her head. And I turn, and she's not moving. And I go running over to her, and I'm like, Cam. And I'm thinking at that moment, this was too much. Like, I'm an adventurous guy, but I took too big an adventure with an 8-year-old. This was too much. And she ends up coming to, and, she hadn't really been knocked out, but she kind of been knocked out. And I'm just holding her, and she's crying, and I'm just, and we're miles into this trail. I was going to say,
where are you at this point? Are you
anywhere
near
and
anything?
We hadn't seen another person in the whole time. Because it was like a Thursday, right? It wasn't a Saturday. We were the only people I'd seen, and I'm up on this mountain, and I don't know how hurt my daughter is. It was a pretty scary time, man. And so she's got this huge gash and this huge lump. Like and I'm like, Cam, what do you want to do? We can hike back down this mountain, go get a hotel room. no shame in it. We can get a shower, sleep in a comfy bed. And we sat there for probably 10 minutes while she just kind of thought about it. And then she said, Dad, I came out here to hike this mountain. I'm going to hike this mountain. And I'm like, that a girl. So I took the dog out of her hands and put it in the side of the backpack. And I'm like, Lily can watch from here, but if
Yeah.
you're going to fall, you got to put your hands down. You got to protect your head. All right. And then I took everything out of her pack. Right. This was a mistake. I didn't know that this was my first backpacking trip with an 8-year-old. So I took all the weight, right? Any water, and just left her with like her sleeping bag and a couple of things. And we get to the campsite at the top of the mountain, and there's this huge fire tower at the top of this mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And we summited the mountain that night and walked up the fire tower and watched the sunset. And it was like the most beautiful scene I'd ever seen. And then we go and we collect the firewood and start a fire. And we made s'mores out in the middle, of the wilderness, and it was awesome. And then that we had 2 more days of that before we came back down the mountain and got in the car and drove to get a shower.
Wow. So how was it telling your wife that story? Did you tell her right away when you got home about the accident?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? So I was like, man, this isn't really something because Katie's a worrier, and rightfully so. She wants her daughters to be safe, and we were sending pictures back and forth with our phones, and I'm like, she's gonna see this picture with this huge bandage on her head. So I was just like, yeah, Cam slipped, and she got a little cut, which we're okay.
We're good.
Yeah, we're good. Then we get home and we tell her the full extent. And she's like, I'm so glad I did not know
exactly right
that had happened, or else I would have worried the whole time, right?
Yeah, for sure. What do you think this has done for your relationship with your kids?
I know we are, every time we get back from something like this, we're so tight. And now we've been through things together that we had never been through before. And so it's just like, I've never been to war, but going to war with your buddies, I hear that a bond is formed that you can't undo. Right. And so, climbing up on that mountain, finding our firewood, and being out in the wilderness together, it brings us together in a way that nothing else, I think, could.
Have planned for the future. What other trips do you got coming up?
All right. So big news. I got my wife on board with doing a backpack trip with all 3 girls.
Wow. All right.
We are leaving on Wednesday. So we're leaving in just a couple of days. And I was very careful with, what I picked. I read a lot of reviews on the All Trails app, just trying to figure out something that didn't have too much elevation gain. And but we're taking a 3-day backpack trip in Virginia. And there's wild ponies on this trail. It's a national park. It seems like just the perfect first trip for Katie, because this isn't really her thing. And my other 2 daughters haven't backpacked before either. But we've got that coming up. And and what's cool is when you're in the woods and there's no other people, it's not like a campground. It's not like you're in a trailer park with a bunch of other trailers and everybody's setting up in their, watching their TVs on their lawn chairs. You're like out in nature. And it's a totally cooler experience to me. And then also, like, there's adventure there because it's a little bit dangerous. Cell phones don't always work. If you miss your trail, you go off trail. I mean, there's an element of danger there. And this is kind of what makes an adventure is that it is a little bit dangerous, right? And when you're on an adventure. But we're gonna take the challenge up, and that's coming up next week.
That's exciting. That'll be a lot of fun for all of you, and your wife too, who hasn't done it. Things like that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Do you do anything specifically just for you and your wife?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So, every year we take a one-on-one trip, just Katie and I. And this year we went to St. Thomas. and no kids, St. Thomas, beautiful clear water. It was awesome. And, we did some hikes and things like that. But, for Katie and I, it's more just being away from the kids,
Hmm.
and we're out there and we're almost like, it's almost like when we first met. We have no responsibilities and we just get to be together without all the responsibility and all that, how much running around. When we got back to town, we're like, how the heck did we do this? We had just been in paradise for a week, and then we had to wind it all back up and remember how we got the kids off to school and how we did homework and how we did bath time. And you figure it out within a couple of days. But the first couple of days we were like, man, this is a big life we're running.
A lot going on for sure. So I'm glad you get to do that with your wife specifically. I think that's also important. I think that's a way to find happiness. You talked about you're just kind of a spiritual person. And I can imagine on these trips with your daughters, whether it's Disney or whether it's out in the wilderness, there are some spiritual moments. What are some of those spiritual moments you have one-on-one with your kids?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's what's cool about the mountains. I always found that with skiing. I would ski in the trees, and sometimes I'd just take a break and sit down in the middle of the trees, and you're like, the whole forest is just so quiet. That's a really spiritual moment. Well, when I'm surfing, it's the same kind of thing. You go out at sunrise and you're just on the ocean. It's like you're part of the ocean, right? So this is why I think nature is so important. But yeah, I mean, I pray. So I think God is talking to me, to all of us, every moment of the day. And so every morning, I start my morning by trying to shut my brain down and just like feel my breath, do some meditation, and then I put my hand on my heart and I feel my heartbeat, and I just say thank you, God, thank you for this heartbeat today. I'm so glad for all the blessings I have on this day, and I appreciate, and I'll name them off, the things I'm thankful for that day. And then I ask for guidance and I say, God, show me what I'm supposed to do today. Whoever I'm supposed to meet, put them in my path. If I'm supposed to say something to inspire somebody, help me say it. Just guide me on where you want my life to go on this day. And that's just, that's how I start every single day. And then every week I journal. And so at the end of the week, I have a spot in my journal that I say, where I call it miracles. And I'm like, where did I see God moving in my life this week? What was a miracle I saw this week? If you ask yourself a question, you always come up with an answer. So every single week when I'm asking myself, what miracle did I see this week? I always am like, oh yeah, man, that seemed like a crazy coincidence. That was like exactly what I needed. That was the exact person I needed. Like this thing happened so coincidentally, exactly the way that it was supposed to happen. It's really amazing. If you're open to seeing how miraculous the world is around you, it really is miraculous. Or we just close our eyes to it and all these great blessings are happening and we just kind of act like it's normal.
Got it. Full transparency, like today was kind of a little bit of a rough day for me, to be honest. I had a few moments where I was kind of like, and just kind of dreading things and struggling. And just hearing you talk and talking about this and blessings and miracles, and it's a blessing to me. So if anyone's getting anything from it, I am for sure. So I'm glad that you're here because it might just be me, hopefully some of my listeners as well, but I'm gaining a lot from it. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, Jake, this is what I was saying, man. This is why I got so passionate about doing the Good Mood Revolution podcast. And, I've got a book that's for pre-sale too. I've been writing it for 4 years about good moods. I do it because I struggle with the same thing. I have challenging days.
Mm-hmm.
The challenging days, like you're talking about today, it shows up and it's heavy and it's like, man, and I just don't want my days to feel like that if I can help it. So what I've learned from all of this, and it's been, now years of study and talking with great people like you, is the only problem is the story we tell ourselves. So on a challenging day, on a stressful day, we're telling ourselves some type of a story. There's some type of narrative. And if we question that story, that narrative, and see if it's really even true, we can see that there's things that like the exact opposite of the story that's stressing us out is also true. So
Right.
this is so what was something challenging? What was one of the challenging thoughts today?
I think today one of the challenging thoughts was just, just I think just the daily nitty gritty of life, and got to pay bills, and it just all kind of came together to where I kind of got overwhelmed. I got a little
Mm,
overwhelmed, and for me, and that's kind of why I want to ask you about this, because for me, it's a lot of like mental talk in my head, like, oh, you could be doing better at this, you're not as good at that. So I have a lot of that going on. So
mm.
yeah, and that's the question I was going to ask you is, how are you? What do you do to get that inner happiness? Because you said it's, a lot of it's in your mind and your mood and things like that. So I
Yeah,
would love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
it's all a negative narrative.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that stresses us out is a negative story. So you just said a few words, and the best thing, like I do this with a pen and a paper, and I'm like, all right, so I'll just write down what I'm feeling, and it's just a super honest thing. And so today you said, the words that you said were the nitty gritty of life. Okay, you said I got to pay bills, and you said I could be doing better at something. So those are the three sentences we're going to question. Okay. Could you do better than you've done?
I think I could always probably do better
No, you can't.
because it's done.
It's done. You did the best you could do. And
Yeah.
every single moment, we do the very best we can do with where we're at. It's actually impossible to do better than you're doing. It is
Interesting.
impossible. This is an ego freaking game where the ego is always belittling us and saying, you could have done better. You could have done that better. It's a complete lie. It's a complete fabrication. It's actually impossible to do better than we're currently doing or than we've done. If we could have done better, we would have, because we're always trying to do the best we can, right?
Right.
So that thought, I could be doing better than I'm doing, is a lie. It's a negative story made up by the ego that in it, like the ego is a survival mechanism. So there's two pieces to us. We got our eternal soul. That piece is lived before this body and it will live on. I mean, it's just how it is. Then our eternal soul embodied this human form, and this human form like is all concerned with survival. It's like, all right, so anything that I make a mistake on, I have to beat myself up about it so I never make that mistake again. And this goes back to like living in tribes. If you bring home the wrong berries and they happen to be the poisonous ones, you could kill the entire freaking tribe. So any little mistake, the ego is like, no, you suck. I can't believe you said that. Or you say and think about going back to tribal days, you say the wrong thing to the biggest, strongest dude in the tribe, and then he challenges you to a duel and he could kill you. So literally saying the wrong thing in public could kill you. So that's why people are like afraid, like we beat ourselves up about saying something stupid in front of other people. And like, that's one of the things I'll beat myself up again about, like, oh, I can't believe you said that. Like, oh, I can't believe you. Well, all of this stuff is just an ego game of survival. And it doesn't actually help us. It doesn't help us in today's world. So telling ourselves we could do better makes us feel worse. Like you said, like today was a tough day. Well, when you feel worse, you're not doing your best. Anytime you feel like burned out or drained or like, oh man, like life's so heavy, you're not your best self. But on a day when you feel amazing, when you feel like on top of the world, when you're like high-fiving people in the hallway and you're like giving everybody compliments because you feel so good, on that day, you can really move mountains. Like you can do anything because anything is possible. On days we feel amazing, anything's possible. So it's really, really important work to find these stories we're telling ourselves and then ask ourselves if it's true. The answer is maybe half true. Then to look at the opposite. So I could be doing better. The opposite of that is I couldn't do better than I've done. And we just talked about how that's true. And in fact, I've done my best. That's a much more empowering story.
100%. Yeah.
So we say now, I'm like, okay, I would just turn this thought around as soon as I identify it in myself. And I'd say, okay, I've done my best. Now I might be like, okay, maybe there's some things I want to improve on. How am I going to work on it? Like, what action am I going to take to, like, there's always, as soon as we feel good about ourselves, we can get super creative. Anything we want to do better at, we can go, read a book on it, hire a coach on it, like model the best, right? How does that land?
No, that's great. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and the way, yeah, describing those feelings of, yeah, because when you are on top of the world, you feel like you can do anything, and you feel like you've got great advice, and you feel like, you just feel like you can do things.
You
For
really
sure.
can do anything. Like anything we set our mind to, anything is possible. And people are like, oh, not anything. Like I couldn't go play in the NBA. I'm like, man, my buddy Kimbo wanted to play for the Clemson Tigers so bad, and he just didn't have the genetics to make the Clemson Tiger football team. But he went to Clemson and he like went to the games. And when he was 55 years old, he was like donating money to Clemson, and he just always had this dream of playing. Well, they opened up something for the biggest sponsors of Clemson to like go on the field and practice with the players. And Kimbo at 55 years
55.
old
I love
was
it.
catching passes in a Clemson practice from Deshaun Watson, who went on to win the national championship that year. And so people are like, yeah, you can't, play in the NFL. I'm like, you don't know, like the essence of your dream, there's a validity to it.
Sure.
Like if you really, really have a dream, you can fulfill the essence of that dream in some way, the way that Kimbo did. All right. So, do you mind if we just look at one more?
Sure. Let's do this. I love this. This is great.
All right. I got to pay bills.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I do. Yes. I got to pay bills. Yes.
You don't have to. I'm serious.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to look at it.
You don't have to. This is another ego trip. The ego is always pressuring us and saying, well, yeah, I have to. I have to pay bills. If I don't pay bills, they'll take my house and then I'll die. Without a house, if I don't have any money, I won't have any food and then I'll die. So then it's always like hanging this pressure over us. And it's like the pressure is it's a total story that drags us down, and it is not fun, and it is not empowering, and it makes us worse. So you'll notice this now that I brought it to your attention, you're going to start to notice that the ego gives you this pressure and says, you don't have a choice. You have to pay your bills. You do. You actually do have a choice. You could just not pay bills. I mean, it's totally a valid. When I catch myself in pressure, ego pressure, I stop and I'm like, I'm not going to be pressured by you. And then I say, I don't have to do what you think I have to do. And I'll sit there until I can notice that not paying bills is a totally valid option for me. That I could just not go to work. I could blow off every appointment. I could get fired. Sure, there's consequences to it. I could not pay my bills. They could take my house. And then I could start over. I could pick up a new career. I could rent a new place. I could get back on my feet. Like I wouldn't die. I've got this option to not pay bills. And once I know that I have an option to not pay bills, then I'm like, okay, I could do either. Which one am I going to choose to do? Well, today, maybe I don't feel like doing any appointments. Today I feel like just telling people that I need a mental health day. I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to go surfing. And that's just going to be my choice. That could be my choice, right? That's a totally valid choice. Could you get fired over it? Sure. There could be a consequence to it. But maybe some days that's actually the better choice, is to say, I'm going to take some time for myself, because when I feel amazing tomorrow, because I poured into myself, I'll get twice as much done as I would have grinding it out today and tomorrow. Or sometimes I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to choose to pay bills today, but I'm going to choose to do it in a way that makes me happy. And so you get to so when something's your choice, instead of the ego pressuring you and saying you have to, you're like, no, I'm choosing to. Then you get to ask another cool question, which is, all right, well, if I'm going to do this, how could I do this job right now and make it super fun? And then all kinds of creativity shows up, like crazy amounts of creativity. I went to a Tony Robbins conference this one time, and he's like, he had to make all these phone calls. And he tells this story all the time. He's like, well, I'm going to make the phone calls for my hot tub. And so he gets in the hot tub and he's calling everyone back, and he's telling them, he's like, yeah, I'm watching the sunset. I'm in my hot tub. This is the best day of my life. And the phone calls went from this big, heavy, had to do thing to this super fun thing. And so I'll do the same thing. I'm like, all right, well, I got to call these people back. I don't have to, first of all. I could choose to. If I'm going to choose to call him back, I could choose to call him back and have fun with it. Well, man, maybe I'll just go for a walk and I'll call him on the walk. Right. And then, and then it's just like all of a sudden I've taken this heavy thing that I feel pressure to do. And I start to say, no, I'm choosing to do it, and I'm choosing to do it in my way. And as soon as we start to make that choice again, boom, we're having fun. And the whole day turns around.
I like it. Just because, yeah, I think, the nitty gritty getting stuck feeling is because of that ego pressure of, oh, you have to do it. Yeah. And I think it does. It makes you, but when you look at it a different way, I mean, me just thinking about it now and thinking, okay, how can I turn this around and make it my choice of how I want to do it? I mean, it's already making me feel better just talking about it. So that's incredible. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, the last comment, if we could question it, is that you've got this nitty gritty stuff to do.
Yeah.
And that's not true either.
No.
That's not true either. Like, and again, I'll be like, anyone in the world would trade places with you in a heartbeat. And the job and the nitty gritty that you have to do was once just a dream that you had. Like when you were younger, a younger version of yourself was like, dude, if I could have that life, the life you have now, I would be in heaven. That's exactly the life I want. So like a lot of times we're like shaming the life that we dreamed of. And this is truly our dream life.
Wow. This is awesome, man. I'm getting some great coaching here from you. This is fantastic. So how is it that you, who's, into real estate, adventurous guy into real estate, how did you decide to like kind of get into this and come up with this podcast and start talking about finding happiness and being in a good mood?
Yeah, it's been a lifelong journey. In fact, it's been a generations long journey. My grandfather was born in New York, and his family had come from Ireland from the potato famine. And when he was a young boy, they all died. Tuberculosis. It was tough, man. If you were Irish in New York in the early 1900s, it was like 1904 when they landed on Ellis Island. You were a scab. You were taking jobs, like discrimination that was so heavy. And they lived in pretty poor conditions, right? Because they were poor people from Ireland. And they all got sick. They got tuberculosis and they died. And my grandfather was an orphan on the streets of New York. And when we're young and big life events happen, our brain is too small to figure out what it means. And so we're really self-centered as a child, not in a bad way. It's just how it is. All children are just really self-centered. They can't really grasp the totality of the world yet. And so what my grandfather did is what any child would do. He decided that there was something wrong with him. He's like, I don't deserve a mom. I don't deserve a dad. There must be something pretty messed up with me that God doesn't love me enough to give me any protection, and that I have to suffer through this. And he was bouncing in and out of orphanages. At the same time, my grandmother was born right around the same time, and her dad died also of tuberculosis. Talk about some coincidences. And her mom, early 1900s, she's a widow now, young widow, has this baby. Then you can't go get a job. Women didn't work in 1905. So she gave her baby away. And then she had 5 other kids. And my grandmother's being raised by her grandparents, watching her own mom raise a whole nother family and not raise her. And so what does she think? I don't deserve a mom. There's something messed up with me. I don't deserve a dad. I don't deserve a mom. I'm unlovable. And this isn't true. This is like on a grander scale, an untrue thought the ego makes up. And it makes it up because it has to come up with a reason. Like, why did this happen to me? Why don't I have a mom? Why don't I have a dad? Well, there must be a reason. And so the ego just makes one up. And then that whole narrative runs your life. That there's something wrong with me. I'm unlovable. And then, so when they met, because people with like energy, and this is the energy of shame, they're like super attracted to each other. So they met, they fell in love. They had 2 kids. My dad was one of those kids. And then parents are always doing the very best they can. That's what I said to you earlier. We always are doing the best we can. So my grandmother, she didn't want her kids to like get blindsided by how much the world is going to beat them down. So she just never hugged them and never loved them and was like, you guys are gonna have to be tough because the world's tough. And so she thought she was helping them by not loving them and making them tough so they could survive a really harsh world. But now my dad and his brother, they're like, there must be something wrong with me. My own mom doesn't love me. Right. And so my dad grows up feeling unlovable. He meets my mom. My mom's got similar like unworthiness traits about her, and they're attracted to each other. I'm born, and my dad is like super mean, like crazy mean, and never lets me feel like I can accomplish anything or that I'm any good, and that I'm always trying to earn his approval and can never get it. And so then he abandons our family when I'm 5, just like. And I'm like, I'm unlovable. My 5-year-old self is like, I don't deserve a dad, right? I don't deserve to be treated well. My mom's a secretary. She got 4 kids. I'm one of 4, 25,000 a year. Like it was tough times. And, so I was born into a cycle of shame, a family line of feeling unlovable and unworthy. And that was to my benefit because, as I grew and I learned how to heal that and then learn that I was lovable, now my pain has become my purpose. And I want other people to heal this inherent feeling that there's something wrong with them and that they're unlovable, which is, by the way, the root cause of like all of it. All the bad moods stem from that one thought that maybe there's something a little bit wrong with me and maybe I'm unlovable.
Amazing. When those little thoughts creep back in, I'm not lovable, or how do you battle that and kick that out?
Yeah, that's so there's I write about it. This is the first chapter of the book I wrote is conquering shame. Now there's 8 primary bad moods. Shame is the worst of them. Shame's the one that makes us feel the worst. And usually anyone that's doing terrible acts, anyone that's doing like the worst of the worst, murder, right? You name it. Any of the bad acts are coming from shame, a feeling that I'm unlovable. And in fact, shame feels so unlovable that it wants to prove it's unlovable. And so it like does the worst things to prove and make a self-fulfilling prophecy that there is something wrong with it. And so then the world is like, what the F? I can't believe you did that. And they're like, yeah, no, I know. There's something wrong with me. I don't know. And that's why people do really terrible things, is because deep down they don't feel like they're worthy of anything good. And so then they prove that. So you need to heal it, and all of us have some of it to deal with.
Yeah.
You can't grow up without getting, some type of shame or rejection. And so there's a process to it. I learned this from this guy named Matthew Micheletti. He wrote this book called The Inner Work. And I worked with Matt for a long time. And Matt said, all of these, first thing you have to do is you have to find the lies in your subconscious about you feeling unworthy or unlovable. And so you just ask yourself questions like, hey, when I'm feeling my worst, what am I believing about myself? What did my parents say about me? What negative events happened early in my life? And what did I like learn from that? Like, what did I decide about myself? And so I came up with a list of like 12 different things about how I was destined for bad luck, and that I wasn't whatever. I wasn't lovable. I was unworthy of having a dad, that I wasn't protected, that I wasn't one of the people that was blessed in the world. It was just a bunch of stuff, right? But it was all true. It was all true to me. It's what I thought was real. And then the same thing we did with your 3 sentences, I wrote the opposite, which is true. I am lovable. I am worthy of love. I am lucky. I am blessed. And just next to each sentence, I wrote the truth, or the truth I want to believe. They're both true. If I believe I'm unlovable, guess what? I'll do things.
Then that's true. Right.
And it's true. It's like this, Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you can't, either way, you're right. Well, if you believe you're unlovable or you believe you're completely loved and blessed, either one is true. It's just which one makes you feel better. Which one do you want to believe? They're both true. There's time. And so when I was believing I was unlovable, I would cheat on my girlfriends. And you know what they would do? They'd break my heart. They'd be like, F you cheated on me, you bastard. Right? And like, And then I'd be all brokenhearted. I'd be like, oh yeah, just self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm unlovable. Well, when I heal it, and then I don't want to mess up anything good in my life, I don't cheat on my wife, right?
Yep.
Because I know I'm worthy of her love. So there's no reason for me to subconsciously sabotage it and then get her to hate me, which I could totally do. I could go cheat on her and then she could find out about it, and then she could hate me for destroying our marriage and destroying this beautiful thing that we have. And then I would be proven right that there was something really wrong with me and I deserve punishment. Or you can heal it. And so I took that list of lies and then I did a funeral. I burned it. I burned it in the fireplace. I said some words. I said, I'm saying goodbye to the old Matt. This was a guy that really, he tried hard. He wanted people to like him a lot. He believed some things about himself. I'm proud of what he accomplished in spite of what he was believing, but that guy's gone now. And I burned that list of lies. And then I read my list of truths and I said, I want to welcome this new Matt into the world. This is a guy that knows he's loved, that knows he's blessed, that knows he's lucky. This is a guy that's going to go on and do incredible things in the world. And then I just read that list of truths every day for the next 30 days and it cemented it. Now, sometimes, sure, some things will come up somebody might harm me in some way. And I'll think there'll be old patterns that are like, I deserved that. But anytime I start to get into a funk, I just start to write down, what was I believing? What is the thought here I was believing? And then is that a true thought, or is that a thought I want to believe? And then what would be a more empowering thought to believe? Usually the opposite of whatever I was thinking.
Perfect. This has been awesome. I mean, we've been chatting here for almost 50 minutes here. It's been incredible. I've taken away a lot. And I know a lot of people are going to be able to take away a lot from you. So if you don't mind, tell us again the name of your podcast and where, the book that you got coming out, just where people can find you if they, they're like, hey, I want to get in a good mood. I'm an adventurous person, but I want to get in a good mood and learn about happiness. Where can they find information?
Yeah. It's the podcast is Good Mood Revolution, and the book, to make it easy, is the same. It's for pre-order on Amazon, Good Mood Revolution as well. And Jake, dude, you're out here changing the world, man. One adventure at a time. It's such an honor to have a chance to talk with you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake with me today. I appreciate it.
All right, brother.
Thank you so much to Matt O'Neill for coming on the show. First of all, every time I get to interview someone on Journey with Jake, I am immediately put in a better mood. And this just reinforced my love for the show and what has been created because of it. As Matt mentioned, he has a podcast called Good Mood Revolution that you'll want to check out, as well as a book with the same name available to pre-order on Amazon. So check out both of those, both the podcast and pre-order his book. You can also follow Matt on Instagram at GoodMoodMatt and check out his website, mattoneil.com. Thank you, Matt. Be sure and check me out on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast. This is a great way to get to know what is coming up on the show. And my Instagram account gives you a little glimpse into my personal life as well. Thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in and listening to the show. Please tell your friends and family about the show. And if you could leave me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show, that would be fantastic. We have another great episode next week with Mike Martin and how the outdoors has shaped who he is and helped him overcome his trials. It is another fantastic episode that you will not want to miss. Just remember, it's not always about the destination as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.